And we are live. What's going on, everybody? Michael here. Welcome back to yet another live episode of Technoid on a Friday night. Not a Thursday, Friday night. Now, you know what they say about Friday nights. That's the best way to spend it. And what better way is it than to relax on your couch, lounge around, and enjoy a nice, long, maybe longer episode of Technoid with I can interact with all of you. What is going on? Good to have you all in tonight. For those of you joining in now, thank you for joining in. And for those of you also joining in on replay, we appreciate your support. Thank you all for coming in. Thank you for making the way. Now, tonight we do have a guest in the show. We will bring him in just one moment. But before we do, let us talk real quickly. Let's get all the BS out of the way. Number one, of course, you must, if you haven't already, follow me on Twitter at Technoid12. Yeah, my Twitter is starting to finally get some very good engagement. So I want to continue that engagement with you guys. So follow me on Twitter, Technoid12. And also, coming in tonight, hold on one second. There we go. Thought I just saw a freeze frame for just a second. Where I lost my train of thought. Oh, yes. Also, as you know, Rogue Energy is a proud partner of this channel. We, of course, are working our way from affiliate to partner. So please, guys, head on over to rogueenergy.com. Get yourself a tub of Rogue Energy. Make sure that you... Oh, wow. I hear an echo. 1 second. Hello? Give me 1 second, guys, while I fix this. Let's do a quick shout out to the man backstage. That is Dennis. What's going on, big man?
Not too much, Technoid. Thank you for having me on the show. I also want to let you know your audio was sounding fine to me. I didn't hear any echo at any point on the live stream side of things.
Just make sure. I hear like a little pickup. Let me take care of this 1 second.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone that's part of the Technoid community. Hopefully, we got some people there from the Best Phone Plan stream earlier popping on over. Technoid, I don't know if you saw, but we did do a live stream, me and Sneed. Made sure to shout this out proper. So hopefully some people will come on by. There is no audio coming in from you. I don't know why you're... Okay. Oh, yeah, you're doing your test. No problem, no problem. I'll have to make a podcast just called Technical Difficulties and just start clipping every time Sneed or one of us has a audio issue. No, I'm just kidding. I should tweet this out. Let's see. Copy. Oh, I'm taking over his channel. I'm down for that. What's up, Gene? I'm glad you can make it, my man. Technoid's just fixing up his audio. TJ, thanks for making it by, man. Thank you for supporting another awesome YouTuber, an up-and-coming rising star. Definitely when we get done with this stream, he actually did a stream with John Prosser that I think is very much worth watching. Technoid's just fixing up some audio issues he's running into. But in the meantime, it's the Dennis Show. Dun, 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 dun. The Dennis Show. Bum, ba, da, da. When you say there's no sound, Gene, I hope you don't mean from me as well. It's just for Technoid, I assume. But hopefully all your guys' Fridays are going well. I know it's happy Good Friday if you are someone that celebrates the religious weekend holidays, and Sunday will be coming up with Easter, the Muppet song. Yeah. Well, Fun fact about that little tune I didn't actually learn from the Muppets. It actually came about because there used to be a football player called Troy Polamalu for the Steelers, and there was a song based off it. It went like Polamalu, I can't do it, but you can look it up on YouTube. It was catchy when I was in like elementary school. I remember during gym class and for like the heartathon and stuff, we would like run around the gymnasium while that was playing.
Are we good now? How are we sounding? Is everything better now?
Yeah, you were sounding good for me before, and now you're
Okay.
sounding good too.
Okay, good. Sorry about that, everybody. Apologies, Dennis. We were just running. No, what happened was when I hit a button on my end to share a screen, it accidentally caused an audio loop on my end. So I was hearing myself talk through. Then all of a sudden, everything just started glitching out.
Gotcha. Well, yeah,
So
we were just talking. Well, I was just talking about how it's my show. We talked about the holidays, which happy
yeah.
Good Friday, by the way, to you.
Happy Friday, thank you.
And then I started doing like a Muppet song, and I was talking about the Steelers. So there's a player named Troy Polamalu who has a song based off him with that Muppet, like bum, bum, na, na, na. But anyway,
Oh
what
yeah.
are we gonna be talking?
Well, actually, before we go there, of course, I did have to finish my shout out of Rogue, because unfortunately, we did not. That's what caused the delay. Now I see why. That.
And it's gone. I'm sure Technoid will be
I'm here.
back.
I'm
Okay.
No. What I was trying to say was, we're gonna shout out Rogue in just a second, but it seems the share screen is not working tonight. Let us see. Apologies once again there, everybody. So you know what, Dennis? I'm gonna actually try something different in just a second. I'm gonna switch over to Google. So take over the show for just 1 minute. I'll be right back.
Sure. All right. Well, Technoid's gone. I'm going to tell you guys, since I see some people that are from the Best Phone Plan show, I figured we could talk about what you guys thought about earlier's live stream with Sneed. Were you guys surprised at all about any of the results that we were seeing inside the Robinson Mall? Or what did you guys think about the surprise stop in the T-Mobile store? Would you give T-Mobile a 10 out of 10 rating for their customer service? I definitely would for the one that was downstairs. I don't know about the old Sprint store. What's up? I see we got another person here.
All right, now we're over on Google. Much better now. So actually, lesson learned. I know we spent too much time on difficulties. If I could restart the stream, I would. But basically, lesson learned: do not use Safari when you're using Restream. But that's what kind of messed everything up. So I'm gonna stick with Google Chrome going forward. But it's working now. We're good to go. So now I can pull up the tabs, everything, no audio echo, no crashing of the device. Again, apologies, everybody. Again, did not plan for this to happen. But thank you, Dennis, for holding it down for me. I was listening on the end. I know you were talking about your show. And by the way, how was the hangout with Mr. Sneed Mobile Tech?
It was good. It was our first meetup. It was definitely too short, but we managed to squeeze something together. We met up at the Robinson Mall, semi-busy-ish area for all things considered, and did some speed testing. Sneed got up to some shenanigans with interacting with the T-Mobile guys, and I wasn't expecting it, but Sneed actually did give me a pretty good idea. I think what I'm gonna do is at some point, maybe I'll make it like a Patreon goal. I'll buy like one of those like those hidden cameras, and maybe I'll just like record my interactions to like kind of like secret shopper style, like go in store to like different stores, see what the customer service is like, whether it be for Metro, for T-Mobile, for AT&T, and make that a little bit. I think that would be interesting.
Man. That would be a very good idea. I like that. You'd be like those YouTubers that do those pranks. They go into those stores, like mess
But
around,
it wouldn't be for being a
it
prank.
wouldn't
Like
be
it
for
would be like
pranking though. Yeah,
but it would be like
would.
serious questions to see like for
yeah.
example, like I could come up with like a scorecard for them, and I could have a thing like set a timer, like how long did it take for someone to actually approach me and say hi, for example.
Oh yeah, of course. Trust me, I believe that. But anyway, real quickly, again, just wanted to give this a huge shout out to Rogue Energy. Again, everybody, as you know, Rogue has been very, 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 very kind to help, again, partner my channel. Use promo code Technoid for 10% off. But as a matter of fact, I am going to do something very special at the end of this video because, Mr. Dennis, you have not tried any Rogue Energy, have you?
I have not.
And you probably don't even know the benefits of having healthy energy. So, here's what we're going to do. After this show is over, we're going to hook you up with a trial stack. I'm going to use my affiliated link. We're going to give you a little discount off it. It will be covered by one and only, yours truly, me. I will send it out to you. You hit me up with your info after the show. We will get you out a trial kit so you can try out every single flavor. And on top of that, you include your own shaker. You can choose whatever shaker you want. Any color, any size, doesn't matter. Shakers on me plus the trials. We're going to hook you up at the end of the show, Dennis.
Sounds good. I appreciate it.
So remember, everyone, get yourself a Rogue Energy stack. Make sure to check it out. And again, Dennis, you will be the judge because, again, I'm going to hook you up. I got you. Alrighty, now that we've got that out of the way, let's get down to business. After so many difficulties of just continuing to fix the show, let's get it back on track. So the main topic of tonight is the M2 series predictions. Now, originally, I wanted to make a full episode of Technoid this afternoon. I wanted to do it, but I decided to save it because I was reading multiple different articles and I was picking up different information from each article. And essentially, this is an early rumor report, but not so early that we're thinking. Basically, it talks about the M2 chip, but not just the beginning of the M2, but the entire series going forward with the M2 Pro, the M2 Max, M2 Ultra, and a potential M2 Ultra Max for the Mac Pro. And apparently, according to the reports, Apple is currently testing 9 different variants of the M2 chip in all of their Mac lineups. So I decided that we were going to break it down. We'll talk about the M2 series together. We'll talk about all the different Macs, where they can improve on, what are some things that we see, and we'll talk about what the report talks about. And then we can give our final thoughts on if Apple will, of course, introduce a new variant to the lineup, because we have seen in the last few months, we've seen Apple really have a huge home run. Pulling up the screen right here so everybody can see. The Mac lineup has undergone one of the biggest refreshes that they have ever undergone. This is like the equivalence of taking how would you say this? It's like taking the iPhone but expanding it into multiple different subsidiaries, but okay, that was kind of a bad analogy. I'm sorry, but the idea is you're taking the most popular thing and expanding it into multiple different projects, but they just keep getting better and better and better. And that's exactly what's been going on with the Macs. And the most recent Mac to enter the lineup is the Mac Studio, which I don't know about you. I mean, it's not a Mac for me, but for a content creator, but for serious users, that's a machine I think anybody could dream of.
So I think it's a mixed bag of chips, in my opinion. The Mac Studio is an incredible machine, don't get me wrong. But for the people that actually would like use it in a proper studio environment, I don't necessarily think it checks all the boxes for them. That's where like the actual pro lineup kind of sits. And then for your typical prosumer kind of consumer, I think it's slightly a little bit too expensive when you start trying to deck it out proper. So it kind of sits in this weird like niche area where I'm not actually sure who it's actually for, to be honest. One of the big problems I specifically have for it, and it's what makes it kind of difficult for me to envision most companies actually using it, is the fact that there's not a lot of like self repairability or self upgrades. Because like I'm just going to use an example. Let's just say you have someone that's actually working on some like 8K production films, right? What does that thing cap out at? 8 terabytes is a storage option, if I'm not mistaken. I believe.
Let me pull it up here. I was actually just setting up the panel, so how we're going to discuss in order. But let me pull up the Mac Studio, because the Mac Studio, I think it caps out at 8 terabytes. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So 8 terabytes, like that sounds like a lot until you start working with like 8K footage, which that's going to be what happens in like a professional environment like that. And in a professional environment like that, you would typically have an IT side of things. They would buy one of those puppies, probably slap together maybe a second NVMe SSD in there for 8 terabytes. But oh, wait a minute, Apple locks it down. You can't add the extra flash. You're just stuck with whatever comes with it. Same thing when it comes with RAM, you know?
The RAM is the biggest ripoff. I agree
Yeah.
with that. I hate that. That's the one thing I personally dislike. I recently just got the M1 Pro MacBook Pro, which is a huge upgrade for me, not just in terms of content, but for everyday productivity. For me, it's perfect. I hate the notch, but I've actually enjoyed the machine as a whole. But I did not like that I upgraded the RAM. I didn't do 16. I went to 32.
And you were
But
forced to get the M1 Max because of that.
no, I didn't get the M1 Max. The M1 Pro is capped at 32 gigabytes. So
Um,
the reason I didn't opt for the Max chip, and this is just me, people. This is just my opinion. I don't need all that graphics performance. I'm a simple YouTuber that's still learning his way up the ladder. But the M1 Pro was more than sufficient. I was coming from a 2017 MacBook Pro 15 inch. So I actually kind of downgraded, went to the 14 inch, but it's much lighter on my shoulders. When I take it with me everywhere, it's much, much portable. The power is incredible. The versatility is back, so that was a huge positive for me, especially with the setup that we have right here. And the other thing that really shocked me was the return of MagSafe, which was a feature I longed. I had died. I would have at the time when the 2017 MacBook came out. I said this, and I swear on everything. You could go back and watch my old video when I was 17 years old. I said I would give my left. We're not gonna say the word, but left circular thing on the lower bot. But we gotta
hey,
go.
there's nothing wrong with talking about nuts. Okay, it's a
My
food.
left, I would have given my left nuts to have MagSafe, and 5 years later, they finally bring it back. So it was a dream come true to experience, and it was definitely a big improvement. I'm not a big fan of the notch. I know that they did it because they said it would help with screen to body, but I argue that they could have just gone the Dell way, or even the 16 inch, which I'm going to pull up real quickly if they still have it here. The older 16 inch, that one had a perfect bezel. That was minimalist. It's definitely smaller than the one on the left, and I thought that would have been fine. But Apple wanted to go edge to edge, but that's still, notch is a notch. But I will say they did a great job of hiding it. They have done a great job. But yeah. So I'm a satisfied customer. But I
Yeah,
agree.
MacBook Pro laptop, different story. I think the MacBook Pro laptop's actually fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
They basically just took away things and then brought them back, but bringing them back is what made it great. Having HDMI back is great. I wish it was 2.1, but I'm just happy to have it back. The Thunderbolt ports are great. They really do get the full 40 gigabytes of transfer speed, and it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
MagSafe also great to have back and new and improved. Although one thing that didn't come back, and I really wish Apple would have just at least put one of them on there, is a USB Type A port. Just one, for the love of
Mm-hmm.
God. USB Type A port would have made a world of difference. Oh, and the
Yeah.
micro SD card coming back was also fantastic.
Oh yeah, you know something, Dennis? I'm gonna be honest. As a content creator for the last 5 years, I have never used the SD card slot until this machine, and I am not going back to USB-C. I know it is an inconvenience. I know it is very tough to switch over, but I am not going to lie to you, honestly, and I'm saying this from the bottom of my heart. I love the SD card slot. I love it, and I am not.
Uh, I'm gonna say a thing, but while I'm doing that, you might want to check your chat and probably time out a user.
That's
But
all right. Bots, we got my mod squad up in the house. If mod squads, you know what to do. Come on now.
all right, perfect. But I will just say this. So yeah, MacBook Pro, I'm really happy with it. Ironically enough, I actually have the M1 Max chip in mine,
Okay.
and I use it even less than you do, which is the funny part about it. But it is the first Mac that I bought since the 2015 version. That was the last one that had that old design. So this was a very big upgrade for me. The reason why I went the M1 Max was because I was trying to future proof it, kind of like I a little bit, and I actually mainly did it. So the GPU performance was one thing, but I did it because when you were doing the upgrades for like RAM, it just didn't make sense not to just go just to upgrade to the M1 Max based off what was on the paper, because you were
Mm-hmm.
getting infinitely more throughput as far as like the actual bandwidth itself goes. I mean, you were going from 400 gigs to 800 gigs of theoretical throughput transfer speeds.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I mean, I thought I was going to be doing some video editing on it possibly, but that hasn't really come to too much fruition. I even bought Final Cut Pro for it, believe it or not. I got Final Cut Pro on that thing, and I've yet to actually use it. I've been editing an iMovie still,
Mm-hmm.
but no, that machine's good. The notch doesn't bother me, honestly, like at all. because the software is really good about basically just putting in a virtual bezel up there. And the screen on that MacBook has got to be one of the best screens I think I've seen on a laptop in a while. It
Yeah.
strikes like, I want to be clear. It depends on the use case, because like obviously there's gaming laptops that are out there that have like crazy high refresh rates, and there's definitely 4K laptops out there. But I find that this specific panel strikes a really nice balance between visual like fidelity, like peak brightness, HDR, as well as being 120 hertz. All of the things together make it a really great display from like a consuming content standpoint, or maybe possibly producing content on it, because it seems to be really color accurate versus some of those TN panels that are out there and
Hmm.
other technologies.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the things that I was willing to make the trade off for the notch. Personally, I would have been happy if they had put Face ID in it, but maybe eventually they'll get there, and then maybe I'll consider. But the only reason, like I said, the reason I didn't go for the Max was only because of that. For me, anyway, I felt that the Pro was more than enough for me. And also, I also was under the conception that it will probably have a huge chunk of your battery, the M1 Max, because you're going to upgrade to possibly a better CPU, so it's going to be more power hungry. And I got a 14-inch. If I
Yeah,
had
but
probably
compared to what Intel was hogging, it's nothing. Like,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Compared to Intel, definitely. But like I said, I'm more than satisfied with the Pro. Maybe down the line I will go for the M1 Max if I feel. But right now it's perfect. Like it's miles
it
better.
it really just depends on your workflow, because if you're using like something like Final Cut Pro or iMovie, something that can actually take advantage of those specific encoders,
Hmm.
then they actually literally edit and render at the same exact speed. However, the extra GPU performance does matter if you start using stuff like Adobe that isn't using that like defined thing that's on the SoC to do the rendering,
Hmm.
and other things along those lines. But yeah, I mean, the M1 chips are great. Honestly, Apple's biggest problem for MacBook for me at the moment has nothing to do with the M1 chipset, because I think the M1 chipset is incredible. Apple's
Hmm.
biggest problem is that Mac OS is the limiting factor, and by that I mean there's not. I would still say we're sort of in the infancy stage of apps that are actually developed in mind for Mac with native support to take advantage of everything that piece of chip can give as far as performance goes.
I love that, the piece of chip. That was a good one. I like that one.
Yeah.
But you're right. You're absolutely right, because Apple recently, the last 2 years they revamped Mac OS to kind of they went from a 32-bit to a 64, I believe, and also they've kind of redid everything. Like they restructured Mac OS, made it more well, how would you say this? How would we put this? They made it more
They made it more like iPad iOS.
kind of, yeah, there you go. It's more like an iPhone kind of, but I would argue that macOS does feel a lot more, I would say more stable versus when I was using it with Big Sur, no, not Big Sur, macOS Mojave and High Catalina. That was the one that shipped with when I first got it. And the software has come a long way. But you're right, they still have to do a few things, especially taking advantage of the native support. The M1 chip is perfectly optimized for Apple apps. There's no denying that. But
Right.
everything else, they've still got some ground to cover. And that's what I wanted to talk about with the M2 chips, because according to the reports, excuse me, we are reading reports that Apple is conducting as they're working on the development stage of their next series. It's already set in stone. They've already got everything laid out. They got their whole project set up, but they're testing 9 different Macs. Now, the way that, from what I understand, from when I read the article, each of these Macs have a different chip in each of them that are slightly different from each other. The only ones that are set in stone, meaning like the ones that are officially going to happen, that they're confirmed, they're going to be the first ones up, is the standard M2 chip. Because at WWDC, they are expected to reveal, at least from what Ming Chi Kuo and Ross Young and Mark Gurman are saying, 2 models. So on the screen that we have here, these were the very first models to receive the M1 chip. So we have the M1 Mac Mini, which I cannot believe is is actually 2 years old. Wow, that was crazy. 2 years old. We have the M1 MacBook Air that followed along, and then the M1 MacBook Pro, the base model, which a lot of people do not understand why it's in the lineup, which I tend to agree, but at the same breath, it's not a bad machine. But out of these three machines, the one that I feel would benefit the most if they're going to release it for WWDC is the Mac Mini. And the reason I say the Mac Mini is because WWDC is focused on coding. It's a coding, it's all about software integration. And the first sets of M series chips that were put in the Mac Mini were sent to developers to start the process, the transition to silicon base. So for me, for the conference, it would make more sense to put the M1 or I'm sorry, the M2 chip in the Mac Mini and send that to the developers and do exactly what they did last year for the last 2 years.
I actually disagree.
You disagree.
I
Which one would
disagree.
you argue with?
I would put it in a MacBook, and the reason why I would do that is because having a chipset for a developer to code for is one thing. Having a whole machine for a developer to code for is better, because now when you develop your app, not only are you taking advantage of the extra horsepower, but when you're developing like the UI interface, which is what the consumer is going to interact with, you can tailor it specifically in mind for that display to maximize that screen real estate. You can maximize the resolution in mind, so that way you can lots of other things in mind, right? As well as thermal control, right? Because what are more people going to be buying, the MacBook or the Mac Mini? More people are going to be buying the MacBook, and there's thermal constraints, especially if Apple decides to pull another no fan edition of the MacBook Air, that you have to bear in mind when you're developing your apps. It's important to know if there's going to be thermal throttling issues when you're developing your app first from a stability standpoint.
I hear you. I respect your opinion, but I too disagree. But I don't disagree because you're wrong. I disagree because for me, if I was a developer, I need a machine that has a bigger support for cooling. The Mac Mini is more versatile also. It has more ports to work with. Not as much as the Mac Studio and other Macs that we've seen, but it's more versatile. And you brought up a question. Would people buy more MacBooks or a Mac Mini? I would argue the only reason that more people would buy Mac Mini, but obviously MacBooks are going to be popular, but the reason I argue is because of the $699 price point, because most people nowadays, the consumption is that you have to spend $1,000 on a Mac. And to an extent, that is true, because if you go the Mac Mini route, you have to buy the external monitor, you have to buy the keyboard, you have to buy the mouse, you have to get all that. But if you get third-party support, you could still save under the 1,000, and most consumers are going to be able to take advantage of the Mac Mini.
So there's two things that I want to bring up real quick. One is when you were talking about development. Developers always develop for the lowest common denominator. The lowest common denominator is always going to be the MacBook Air. Second, as far as pricing goes, while I agree with you, a lower price point is important when consumers buy products, most consumers don't have a Mac Mini on the mind. Like when people think Apple and they think Mac, they think MacBook. You got the student deals and the advertisement focus on that. All the promos, whenever price drops happen on the MacBook Air, and they usually happen just as short as 6 months after release. And also, please don't forget the trade-in deals. There are trade-in deals when it comes to MacBooks. I don't commonly see them for Mac Minis. I know Apple does it specifically, but Best Buy and other places that like big retail box stores typically have crazy doubled up trade-in deals for the laptops like MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, or they'll do some type of like get a free pair of Beats headphones or something for Black Friday, and it's always tailored toward the MacBooks.
Well, they do also do bundles with the Mac Mini at Best Buy. I've seen many times they've bundled the keyboard and mouse. They've also done the Beats headphones with the program. But again, listen, we have our own different opinions. We're obviously we don't have to agree on everything, but at least
Right.
we are on the same page of them focusing on the lowest common denominator and at least focusing on the general consumers. So
Agreed.
at least we agree on that.
Agreed.
So that's okay, and I'm fine with that. Now, when we get to the MacBook Pro, this low end MacBook Pro, me personally, I don't feel they need to make this machine. I get why they make it because there is some people that do want a low end, and there is a benefit with the low end MacBook Pro that it does have a slightly bigger battery. I don't know why this is a marketing ploy. I guess that's the way to distinguish it, but they put the touch bar still on that model. But the main thing that I see is a game changer, or not a game changer, a bigger benefit would be the cooling system in the MacBook Pro. So it will be able to operate better. But with that said, though, I'm not sure most consumers, like you said, are going to jump for the baseline MacBook Pro, or at least pro users or mid pro. I don't know. I feel like the MacBook Air kind of is the sweet spot because there were tests done on Max Tech, and also I don't know if you watch what's it? Linus Tech. Thank you, Linus Tech.
Oh, I love Linus.
Linus is
Literally
great.
wearing his merch right now.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So him and his team did a comparison when they first came out. The only area that the MacBook Pro beat out the MacBook Air was the cooling. But everything else, in terms of performance, the only difference, I think, and it shows it on here, is the base MacBook Air does not come with the full 8-core. The MacBook Pro 13-inch gives it to you, the base configuration. Because I think if you go to purchase, here, if I could pull
Yeah, it's the 7-core
you
down.
get the 7 cores, and then you pay the extra. So some people would argue just to get, you could go the Pro 13. My idea would be just drop the Pro, rechange the name to the Air, or just call it MacBook. Just call it MacBook. Remember how we had MacBook and then MacBook Pro, but then of course the Air was kind of in there. I feel like that's a way Apple could correct it. Maybe you disagree, but I feel like if we're going for easy way to kind of like make it easier for the consumer, MacBook, standard MacBook, MacBook Pro. That's my opinion.
I mean, when it comes to names, it doesn't matter to me. I think Apple's already butchered most naming schemes at this point. And it's not just it's not just Apple. It's a lot of companies. Even like USB, when it came to the renaming scheme of like USB 3.1 and 3.2, all the companies suck at naming. So for me, it doesn't matter. But I do agree with you. The 13-inch MacBook is in a very precarious position. I honestly think that the 15-inch or 14-inch, what is it, 14 inches now on the
14 and 16-inch.
14 and 16. Okay, I think the 14-inch basically cannibalizes the 13-inch. Like, it's such a small, minute difference. Like, just have the 14-inch be the MacBook Pro. If you want to have a low-end version of it, fine. Just use it in that same chassis, and then make the Air actually better. Please throw a fan in there. Okay, God forbid someone hears a fan blowing. Just give it the cooling it needs. And also improve the display on it, because that was a big weakness of the Air too. The brightness is kind of dim compared to the MacBook 13-inch. So improve the screen, throw a fan in there, and literally add like 2 more USB-C ports or something on there and call it a day, and it's perfect.
I agree with you on that. So yes, 100%. I think if they were to make the MacBook Pro the MacBook Air with the whole cooling system in there, that would be perfect. That's a way that I could argue, because even though I think the MacBook Air, for the history of Apple, has served a very integral history, there's no need to have 2 low-end products of very popular series. You should have just one. And that's where I go back to the naming scheme, because the perception, and also based on the machine that you're outputting, where I feel if they took, and this is my suggestion, but I don't think Apple would ever do this, but if they were to just drop the MacBook Air, this model, this thin model, replace the MacBook Pro with the word Air, call this the MacBook Air with the cooling fan, the 2 Thunderbolt, I think it's Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 4. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to check the spec sheet just a sec. Call this the MacBook Air, price it at $1099, because I think $1099, most people say that $999 is a great sweet point, but if you're going to go an extra $100 for the better, like for the cooling, it would make, I think, a more...
Blame it on inflation like every other company.
There you go. Perfect. You see? But yeah, that's my suggestion. Because the MacBook Pro 13-inch, like you said, it gets eclipsed when you look at the 14-inch. When you look at these machines side by side, you're getting a more powerful machine on the right because of the addition of the Pro or the Max.
I mean, for me, it's not even about just to clarify, for me, it's not even about the power. It's the I/O. The I/O alone makes it worth. And then the screen is infinitely better. You got the XDR screen versus the awkward resolution Retina that's been used for forever. Also, I know you talked about the touch bar. For me, that's a demerit. I hate the touch bar. So not having the touch bar for me is a pro.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I know a lot of people hated it. I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it either. So I was one of those people that was just like, it's just there. But I
Well,
could see why everybody hated it.
that butterfly keyboard was the
Ooh.
worst thing Apple ever did. That was a big reason why after the 2015 I didn't upgrade until the new MacBook Pro came out.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, the new MacBook Pro, the one that's sitting on the floor behind me, basically fixed most of my gripes that I've had with MacBooks for a while. Hence the reason why I was happy to drop about 4K on it.
Yeah, yeah. I'll be honest. I was able to get mine. I did a trade in, so I was able to trade in mine. I was able to get it for 1,800 total. That was a good deal for me. At least also included a college discount too, because but yeah, so now we talk about the M2 quickly before we move on to the next lineup of MacBooks that are coming. So starting with the M1, I think the biggest change for the M2 chip, I think the biggest thing is going to be the GPU. It has been said by many people, and I think it's going to be obvious, they're going to up it to 10 cores. I don't see them upping the CPU. I think 8 cores is right where it needs to be to keep it baseline. At least. You could go 9 cores, but I think the GPU is going to see the biggest increase. Now, the question that everybody's been asking me, will it be as significant as the M1? And I say no. It will be marginally better. It won't be significantly, it'll be marginally. And you see, we agree on that too, because we know the truth. We've seen this before with the A series chips in the Apple iPhones. The only big change was when they introduced the Bionic chip for the Face ID. That was the biggest change. But after that, I mean, they're very fast, don't get me wrong, but they're very marginal. So we've seen this footprint before.
I think what will happen, this is my prediction. I think we'll see about anywhere between 20 to 30% uplift in graphics performance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll see about a 15% improvement in CPU performance. And that will either come in the form of IPC gains or a restructuring of the performance to efficiency cores. I actually, this is my spicy take. It's possible CPU performance actually gets a higher increase, but the reason for that is because I have a sneaking suspicion that Apple might bump it up to 10 cores. And hear me out on the why on this real quick.
Okay.
So, ARM based processors will, I don't want to say never, but it's not likely that ARM based processors will ever be able to match x86 traditional based processors when it comes to just raw performance,
Mm-hmm.
because that's not what they're meant for. They're meant to be low power, high efficiency, right?
Yes. Low power, high efficiency. You're correct.
They also have a different instruction set that's also simpler. Because of that, ARM very linearly benefits from having more cores, unlike traditional processors. And you see that when it comes to app design as well, from a parallel processing standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So having like an extra couple efficiency cores, maybe it's a split of like, say, 6 powerful cores, 4 efficiency cores, makes a lot of sense for many reasons, whether it be from a battery life standpoint, just a general performance standpoint, among other things, that I think it would make sense for Apple, because I see the next iteration of the Pro chipset lineup and the Max chipset lineup doubling their core count. So I think Apple would want to kind of have that kind of scheme where it goes from like 10 to 20 if you go to the Pro series side of things. Um, Plus, most things that people do don't require, like the common user, I mean, like the kind of person that's going to buy an Air, they're
Mm-hmm.
not doing the most GPU intensive things in the world, but they do a lot of things that use those CPU resources, whether it be simple Chrome browsers with multiple tabs, their Word document, their Excel sheets. Excel, despite what people think, if you got some crazy workbooks, can actually be pretty CPU intensive when you're doing those calculations, especially if you start throwing in some extensions that start doing conversions. So, yeah, I can see like about 15% uplift on CPU performance and maybe like 30% GPU on the next chipset. And I see them bumping up to 10 cores.
That's actually not a bad, hot take. That's actually a very valid take. I would actually argue that's very valid in very resorts because the average or the general, I gotta stop saying average. The general consensus is that most people are low end users, meaning they don't do the highest performance. And an ARM based CPU, especially like the M1, had met the demand. As a matter of fact, it actually outperformed some desktop level chipsets at the time. But then once the M1 Pro and the M1 Max came in, that kind of just took it to another level. So yeah, I think you have a very valid point. They could upgrade it. My only negative, my well, not negative, but my only counter would be then it starts to conflict with the Pro and Max, unless when we get to the Pro and Max, then we'll discuss what they can change. But if they don't change the CPU core for the Pro and the Max, but I think they will, then you could probably get away with the 10 core for the M2, and then you can go up to 12 or 14 cores. We'll get to that in just a second.
Well, like I said earlier, for the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, I see them bumping it up to 20 cores. And since everything is basically just stitching things together or cutting away, if M1 Pro and M1 Max go to 20 cores, then the
Mm-hmm.
M2, right? If the M2 is just a cut down version of that, it would make sense that those would be those chips that didn't produce the high enough yields. They end up repurposing them for M1, which is why they would turn off the 10 cores that didn't work efficiently and just throw it in that product.
Very, very point. I give you on that one. So now we get to the Pro and the Max. We'll talk about the Ultra last in just a second. So according to Ming-Chi Kuo, he claims that Apple, while there is no confirmed number or a rumored number of the cores, there is a report going around saying that the GPU cores are going up to 38 for the Pro or the Max. He didn't specify. I think he meant, because I gotta pull up this article. Let me pull it up real quickly. Let me find it because I read it and it said 38. So I'm assuming that's going to be the base core for the Pro. At least that would be for the Pro end, because then the Max, I feel like they probably bump it up more. But let me pull up this article a while. But let me ask you. So you argue that they would up the CPU cores to 24, you said?
20.
20. What would you argue that the GPU should go up to for the Pro or the Max?
Should or what I think it will be?
What do you think they should be for you? Should.
Should?
Should.
I think they should double it to 64 cores. So basically, what I'm going for here is notice how the Ultra has 20 cores with 20 core CPU, 64 core GPU.
Mhm.
That should basically become what the M1 Max is. And the new Ultra, whenever that comes out, should be 128 cores and 40 cores respectively. Get what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Yes. I got the article right here. So, according to Ming-Chi Kuo, he says that the M2 Max chip will feature 12 core CPU and a 38 core GPU alongside 64 gigabytes of memory. That's the report going on right now. As for the Ultra chip, there is no talk of them doubling it because they're saying they're going to use that fusion that architect that they built in. They're going to double it and put that into Mac Pro. But before we get to that, just hearing that report, do you think that is a mistake by not doubling it to 64?
It's hard to call. Depends what Apple's going for. I would lean towards yes, because the M1 Max especially is definitely geared towards those more pro or like actual pros, right?
Mhm.
And you know how Apple does their graph when they did their event and they said, "Hey, our GPU performance is up to this point per wattage."
Yeah.
But then they don't show the rest of the graph where like an
Yeah.
RTX 3090 actually keeps going up and up and up.
Uh huh.
I think that Apple GPUs, although impressive for a per watt standpoint, if all you care about performance is what you care about, they're not actually that impressive. Like an RTX 3090 and RTX 3080 blow these things away. Dedicated GPUs in general
Yeah,
blow the
dedicated
performance
GPUs blow
away.
them. Yeah, yeah. Even
So
GTX's, even Nvidia's GTX was also very solid.
yeah, and AMD too. Like everybody's dedicated GPUs blow this away. And if you're an actual pro, you don't really care too much about battery life because you're probably going to have this thing plugged. Like when it's time to actually do some real work, you're probably going to have it plugged into your monitor from Apple that's going to be charging it while you're doing stuff. You just want max performance at that point. And if that's all you care about, then I think doubling up the GPU core count to get that performance to where it needs to be so you can actually do proper 8K footage rendering
Mm-hmm.
makes sense because you know 8K even so most content nowadays is I would say being outputted on streaming services in 4K. But
Yes.
if you look how it's originally recorded, a lot of that content actually gets originally recorded in 8K and then super sampled down to 4K to give peak visual fidelity. And 8K workloads are tough. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do it on a MacBook Pro because you definitely
Mm-hmm.
can, but like it'll struggle if you start adding on too many effects inside of Final Cut
Oh
Pro.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a mistake. I think they should really be maximizing the core count, maximizing the GPUs, because that's an area where your traditional Intels and your AMDs just can't do it, because they run into heating issues because the
Mhm.
x86 architecture requires much more power. So that's where ARM has a leg up as a architecture to enable those types of things.
And I think I know why they're doing that. I think that because of this big boy over here, the Mac Pro. I think that's why they're saving it. I feel like they're going to spec this machine out the most. And I know why they would do it. Not be just because it's modular, unless there are reports saying that they may take away the modular setup. Some people are saying they may go back, not to the actual design of the trash can, but something like that where it's not as modular, because this Mac Pro has the Intel Xeon W processor. Tell me if I said that right.
You got it.
And I believe this model Mac Pro was, at the time before the Ultra chip came out, was one of the most infamously powerful Macs you could buy.
It
As
actually still is.
it still is in some regards, because I've seen testings of where the Ultra actually outputs more per wattage, and also outputs in terms of graphical performances over the Intel. But like you said, real pros are not going to be using. Most people nowadays opt for external GPUs. Most people go that route because they can get a better graphics performance. And you know what's funny? Fun fact: I found this out the other day. Most gamers that, if for whatever reason, if you want to game on a Mac, I say don't do it. But if you want to, use an external GPU, because the GPU inside the MacBook will not cut it. If you're
Yeah,
running on,
the only problem is you have to use an AMD GPU because NVIDIA
Mhm.
drivers is supported on Mac OS.
Yeah, and I think the only one that supports AMD is Stream or Steam. I think it's Steam.
Well, no.
For the
I'm
Mac.
saying, oh, you're talking about SteamOS. You're
Steam
talking about
OS, yes, yes.
okay, yeah. That's correct. But no, but going back to that big beefy boy over there, that thing actually still does outperform pretty much all the M1 chips where it matters. Where it matters. I'm not talking about native apps. I'm talking about like things like Adobe and stuff like that.
Yes,
Things
yes.
that
You're
aren't
right. You're right.
specifically optimized for ARM. That puppy right there does outperform. Although one thing I found hilarious, okay, is that
Mhm.
there was an add-on. Remember that specific encoder that we were talking about for Final Cut Pro that comes with all
Yeah.
the M1
Encodec,
chips?
yeah.
I thought it was hilarious that that thing was like a $2,000 add-on or something stupid. And it became worthless in those beefy boys.
I know. I remember that. I think it's still on there. Here, let me pull it up here. If you go to the buy now,
Yeah,
and fun fact, they still have the rack model where you could like put it into a like really
like a
corporation
server rack.
style
Yeah,
server. Yeah, there you go. If you go to the Mac Pro here, I believe it was. Tell me where you see it, because it was the Afterburner.
I think it was. Yeah, that's it.
There, two
Yeah,
thousand.
The Apple
Oh,
Afterburner card. Yeah, it was 2,000. I told you, bro.
oh man.
But dude, wait, can we just take a moment to look at the like real quick, do the 28 core real fast.
Yes.
$7,000, and then look at the max RAM you can put in this. You can
Oh,
put 1.5 terabytes of
and
RAM.
then you go to the graphics. Oh my gosh. Let's see. What's the maximum? Well, which one is better? Would you say W690X or W680X? I'll say W690X
Well, yeah.
if you wanted to really spec it out. You're looking at, let's see, and you add the Afterburner, you're looking at $54,000. And then if you want the stainless steel wheels.
Which what it's funny because the studio, so again, just raw performance, this is better.
Yeah.
That being said, the studio gets you, I would say, about 80 to 85% of the way there for a literal like 20th of the cost.
Well, let's do the math. So if we spec this bad boy out, it's 54,000 estimate plus taxes included. If we
Let's just
go,
call it 55 to make it
let's
even.
call it 55. There you go, $55,000. If you go to the Mac Studio and you go all the way up to the Ultra, which by the way I was tempted to do it, but again I opted for the MacBook. I like a laptop. You spec this bad boy out to the maximum they get. Now again, you're not gonna get that maximum RAM, but 9,000 I'll say. So
Yeah.
55 minus 9,000. That's how much you save, people. And the afterburner's inside.
Yeah, and what's funny is you're actually getting multiple afterburners because I think with the correct me if I'm wrong, Ultra. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Ultra actually has like 8 of those afterburner like streams. Like I can do 8 of them if I remember
Yep,
correctly.
because there's two M1 Max connected on top of each other. And I think each M1 Max has 4 encoders.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. So you could get there, but I would love to see what Apple does with the Mac Pro. That to me is very interesting because the Mac Pro, for the longest time, everybody said that is the mother of all Macs. Like that's like Zeus level performance. That was what they were dubbed back in the day when I was in high school. But I wonder if they do the Ultra series, are they going to do two Ultra chips or two, like, because we know that they're a fusion because of that architect. They're
The Infinity Fabric.
they're two M1 Max chips together. Are they going to double that? Are they going to triple it? Like, what are they going to do? Because they've even announced it. Even Apple has come out and said, we're working on this Mac. That's the last one up, but we'll get there when we get there. Some people have even speculated that it would be shown at WWDC this year, which I disagree with. I don't think Apple's ready, but who knows? I mean, I think the most logical would be to spec that machine out to the max that it can. I don't know what you'll call the chipset. I don't know if you make another chipset where you fuse two ultras,
I
but
think they would have to be. Can I be perfectly frank?
sure.
I don't think they can just keep sticking it together. Like because we kind of saw this with the MacBook Studio, right? With the Ultra chipset, the performance gains weren't like parallel. Like they're like you would expect performance to be doubled, but in real world testing, the performance didn't actually double. Like if you get what I'm saying,
Yeah, I didn't.
and
Yeah, yeah.
in the same way, like if I got two RTX 3090s and put them into an MB into Sly, like
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't get double the graphics performance. It just doesn't work that way. Um, Going back to the M1 series of chips here, if Apple decides to stitch a bunch of those things together, you have to remember that the chip itself is going to be huge, and they might lose some of the transfer speed, for example, on the memory,
Mm.
because now you have all those different interconnects as possible bottlenecks. The heating might become an issue. You might have to design special cooling to actually cover the whole IOC of the chiplet to keep it cool. Um, then there's the topic of yields, and it still doesn't address all the things that those pro users, like those specific pro users, might have to deal with. I think that Apple would have to just custom redesign a whole new chip just for that product scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think they would do, this is just my prediction, I think they would probably do something along the lines of like 128 core with like some crazy GPU. They might even, you know what they might do? You know, Intel with I want to say it's with Adobe is able to improve rendering performance by using the integrated graphics on the Intel chip uh,
Mm-hmm.
in in combination with a dedicated GPU.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if Apple could do something similar where they use their GPU performance that's built onto the SoC in combination with a dedicated like AMD GPU, something like that.
That's a
So like
possibility.
maybe they design a whole new SoC, give it like a custom motherboard. That way it allows those true pro users to put in dedicated GPUs or other peripherals like soundboards or other things that they might need for their
Yeah.
workflow.
Oh, of course. And I'm showing an example of the cooling system that's in the Mac Studio. If they were going to make a bigger chip with a bigger cooling, I think at that point you're probably going to have to put, you know, I feel like because this system that they have right now, I believe, I don't know if this is a heat sink. Correct me if I'm wrong. So the air take goes through the bottom, then it gets sent throughout the machine into the fans, and then it's sent out the back. Somebody said that it's not a heat sink, or maybe because watch what happens when it gets pushed out the back. The hot air comes out the back. Is that piece? They don't show the back, but that's not a heat sink, is it?
No, so
So,
the heat sink is actually what's a your your heat sink is actually what's on top of the CPU.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The thermal, the like the paste or something like that thing that goes on
No, so
top of it.
there's thermal paste,
Thermal
And then
paste.
there's your cooler, but the cooler has that metal like radiator looking thing. That's your heatsink.
Like copper, kind of copper
Yeah,
coat.
that's your copper
Okay,
for your
okay, okay.
metal.
There we go. It's been a while since I've built my own PC. It's been a while, but I remember. Now it's starting to come back to me because for a machine that powerful, you really need to, they're gonna have to. As a matter of fact, let me pull up the cooling system in the Mac Pro right now because I don't even know what cooling system they have in that machine as we speak. I know they made a big fuss about it when it came out.
I don't think they actually use a cooler.
They don't. Oh wait, let's see.
I
Let me
think if I remember correctly, doesn't that thing not have any fans?
I'm
It
not
does pass.
sure.
I'm like, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure it does passive cooling. I don't think it actually has fans.
So no cool. Oh,
Well, no
well, let's see.
cooling's not the right word, but
Well,
like,
here it is. Here's what it says.
yeah, like they do a
Uh,
heat sink, but it's fanless. See how
but
it's
it's
fanless?
fanless. Yeah, it's
So it's
fanless.
passive. It's passively cooled.
Passively. That means you're gonna have to put it next to an AC. Just kidding. But no, yeah, for this machine, because look at the architect of the Mac Pro. If because obviously they're not using Intel anymore, so they're gonna have their own M series base. But with a machine that big, I can't see passive cooling being an option in that.
I mean, like I said, the bigger problem for me isn't has nothing to do with Apple's SoC, like from like a performance standpoint, because I believe they can make a very powerful chip. The bigger problem that needs to be addressed has to do with I/O and specifically PCIe 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 slots because
PCIe, yes.
true pros are going to have peripherals that require a PCIe attachment. Like Thunderbolt won't be the answer.
No, yeah.
Like true pros are going to have soundboards or other customized pieces of hardware that meet their specific niche workloads, whether that be the engineer doing CAD or the music producer who's using true lossless like audio at like the highest possible bit rates,
Mm-hmm.
or the person that's working at freaking Disney doing like some 16K footage for Disney, like whatever it
Yeah,
is,
yeah, you're right.
like they're gonna need it. Like Thunderbolt's great, but it can't do what a PCIe lane can do from a throughput standpoint of actual bandwidth, a latency
Mhm.
standpoint, and everything else that goes along with the tech.
Matter of fact, the new MacBook Pros, they like you said at the beginning, it doesn't have a 2.1 HDMI. It has 1.4 or two. Just what was the HDMI
I think it's
rated?
2.0.
Oh, it's 2.0, not 2.1.
Yeah, it's 2.0 instead of 2.1, but that point 1 makes a big difference
Mm-hmm.
because 2.0 caps out at 60 FPS, and I believe it doesn't. There was something it doesn't do. I think it does like 4K at 60, but it can't do 4K at 120 hertz. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. It can't do 4K at 120 hertz, which
120 hertz.
sucks
Yes.
because if you wanted to connect it up to like a Pro Display XDR or something that actually has the ProMotion,
Mm-hmm.
then with HDMI you can't.
Yeah, you're gonna have to use Thunderbolt. But again, Thunderbolt don't solve the issue, like you said. So I agree with you. I'd like to see more PCIe's. And one last thing to talk about before we end. Now we do know that Apple isn't working on a iMac Pro kind of machine, but they recently launched the Studio Display, which has got a lot of mixed reviews. I would ask you, do you see Apple extending their display lineups, adding a third option, or do you think this is it?
I think this is it. Studio Display. First off, I gotta throw this out of here. Studio Display is hot garbage. Is it abolishment? It is absolutely abysmal. Apple has spent all this money coming up with a custom charger for their iMacs or whatever, and then pulls the move they did with the Studio Display, making a non-removable charging cable. You've got to be kidding me.
Actually, it turns out the cable is removable, but it's just so tight to pull out. It's like the HomePod. When Apple did the HomePod, the cable at first you couldn't pull it out, but Linus said that it was able, and then Apple put a
No,
state.
I watched the stream,
You
but
watched the stream.
I wouldn't call that a removable cable. In fact, Apple themselves advises in their support information that it's a non-removable cable.
Okay, so they say it's not removable. Okay.
So like removable to me is something that's easy and doesn't have the potential of breaking or wearing down over time. I would not call
Mhm.
that removable. And there's just so many things about that display that I just really dislike. Like it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, what's the point of having the A13 chip in there? Like Like it's not doing anything.
It's basically just a giant iPad without iOS. That's kind of
It's
what
actually you're wrong. It's actually running iOS.
it's running iOS.
Yes.
I would love to. So it is basically a giant iPhone or iPad, whatever you want to call it, but just without like the software being shown through the screen.
Yeah. I hate that display in so many different ways. The only thing that's good about it, is the actual panel. That's it.
The
Everything else
panel
about the
itself, yeah.
display, is terrible. The fact that they give you a non-height adjustable stand in 2022 and make you pay $400 is insane. And
Yeah.
remember, by the way, this is a permanent decision. If you buy the one that doesn't have a height adjustable thing, you can't just remove the
No,
stand and
you
replace
can't.
it.
You gotta buy it. You know, you gotta get the tillable. So that's and what's funny is that I'm gonna be honest. I was actually looking to buy this display because I'm going to be moving. I told you I've got a new setup coming soon for live streams. I was going to replace the monitor I have now, bring that one to the new location, and then just for my own personal use, get the studio display. But then after I looked at the price difference, I'm like, do I really want to drop that much, or I can get myself an LG, which will be probably more than excuse me, probably more than enough. But then I thought about it and I'm like, it's more for personal use. It's not really for video editing. It's more for me just kind of just plug my Mac in, just use it. Because I agree with everything you said. I do think that Apple really overbuilt, like not overbuilt, they over spec'd a simple display. I feel like they put too much into a simple standardized display because if did you see the teardown for this
I
display?
did. It basically looks like the insides of potential like one of those iMacs,
Mm-hmm.
but missing all the parts and
Yeah,
focusing on things that weren't important. Like
it actually looked messier. It actually looked worse than the iMacs they have now. And when you brought up the cable, I wanted to say earlier, why didn't they just reuse the iMac's power source like design? It was magnetic. You can plug it in and then you could plug the cable into the wall. Why didn't they follow that design? Because the whole idea that Apple was going for with the studio display, the whole idea was supposed to be minimal, premium, and simple. But
they
it's not
hit none of
simple.
those.
They hit none of those because minimal would have included the tiltable stand. You didn't have to charge $400 for it. Of course, again, they'll blame inflation. Premium, sure, the panel's good. I agree, the panel is very good. Well, actually, thinking about it now, it's actually a reused panel because they said that it was a reuse in the iMac 5K, but they
Yep.
said that they slightly tweaked it. I don't know where they tweaked it. And then the third thing is the convenience. There's no convenience with this thing because the thing is soldered onto the back. If
Also,
this panel
can
breaks,
can I just say one thing about the panel real quick?
go ahead, go ahead.
600 nit brightness is not a premium panel in 2022.
No, it's not.
That is very dim, especially if it's supposed to be HDR. That does not meet true HDR specification. It needs to be able to hit at least 1,000 peak brightness to be proper HDR.
Yeah.
But also, I really want to quickly say, as far as a panel, as far as buying a monitor goes, man, real talk, 5K is all marketing hype. I promise you, if you get a good, proper, good 4K monitor,
Mhm.
not only will it likely be price comparable or cheaper, but you're gonna get a much better display.
Oh yeah. I'm all for 4K. My current monitor right now is a 4K monitor. Granted, it's from I bought this back in 2018, so it's 4 years old. But it's from a low company called Scepter.
Okay. Well,
But
Alienware actually came out with an absolute beast of a monitor. Linus Tech Tips is supposed to be doing a review on it.
mhm.
But it has the new mini LED tech in it, but it's also like 240 hertz or something like that, and it's 4K. It's gonna be a beast. But look, going back to your main question, you were talking about monitors and what Apple should do. Apple shouldn't make any more displays if they keep trying to pull the moves that they do. And honestly, the Pro Display XDR, I can't be as hard on it as I was with the Studio Display because it is a good
Mhm.
display.
Mhm.
$5,000 though,
Mm-mm.
at best, and this is me being kind, okay? At best, that Pro Display XDR is worth 2,500 at best.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Because look at this, 1600 nits peak brightness. That's true HDR. And you know what's weird? You know what's actually very weird? The Pro Display XDR, you would think would be the better monitor in terms display wise. It's better. But feature-wise, the studio displays has a few things that the Pro display
You're
doesn't.
referring to the FaceTime center stage camera?
Not just that, they also don't make you pay $1,000 for the Pro stand. Apparently, they just give you, so technically you do pay $400. I mean, it's not. It's like dealing with a deal with the devil, but still cheaper than paying $1,000. And then remember when they announced that Pro stand was at $999. That
I remember it was a meme.
But then there's also the microphone. I think they have like a, obviously pros are not going to use the stuff inside of the thing.
I mean, look, if you're talking about speakers on a monitor, look at what's on my head. Look what's on your head. We're not going to be using
Yeah,
like
we're not gonna.
these features. Again, I'm going to say it again. For a PC monitor or Mac, speakers don't matter. If this was a TV we were talking about, fine. This is a monitor. People have headsets. Pros are not going to tune up their music audio using the freaking built-in speakers of a studio display. Like like
Imagine that
Apple.
imagine that one developer that does it to make it quote spatial audio with Dolby Atmos.
God oh freaking mighty. Listen, for that one developer out there, I'll personally spend the $100 to get them a pair of freaking speakers to put on their desk.
There you go. As a matter of fact, you could even do well with a pair of speakers nowadays. Speakers are getting so much better. I'm a huge audio advocate. You know me. But yeah, I think
You
this
still
is it.
got the partnership with the earbud company?
It's not a partnership, but I still review their products. They do notice me. But we have a very good relationship. You know,
What's the company's name?
Soundcore.
Soundcore. Hey, Soundcore, if you're listening to this, sponsor this man. Sponsor this man right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. But to wrap this show up, again, guys, this was a really fun episode. This wasn't really to kind of, just like waste time. This was a genuine fun episode. I had a great time with this one. But to round everything off, yeah, I think this is it for Apple's display venture. I mean, I'm glad they have displays to offer, but I mean, it's not really as good as what you could get out there. I'm gonna look into that Alienware, like you said. I used to love Alienware when I was a kid. But overall, wrapping everything up, and then Dennis, I'll let you have the final say. I think the M2 series, with the exception of the M2, maybe Max and Ultra, I feel like they're going to be marginal upgrades. I don't think they're going to be as groundbreaking as when the M1 first came out, because when they first came out, they blew everything out. But then you really can't top that. It's a hard act to follow unless you really double everything. So I think everything's going to be marginal, but I do look forward to seeing what they do in terms of efficiency and power consumption. I do look forward to seeing again with the PCIe if they finally give some ports. But there is one last wild card, and I'll let you end it with here. The wild card was that they are going to update the high-end Mac Mini by putting the M1 Pro chip in it, so to replace the Intel Core i5 model. So final thing to let you round off everything, and then you can talk about that if you want. But overall, round it off. Go ahead.
So rounding it off, I agree with what you said. I don't think the M2 is going to be groundbreaking. I agree with everything you just said as far as like what the improvements will look like. Not saying it's the right move, but that's probably what's going to happen. As far as the improvement to replace the Mac Mini that you were showing, that's awesome. That will probably sell like hotcakes. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly of all, though, I want to thank you for having me on the show. I enjoy talking to you. It's definitely refreshing to talk about things that aren't just cell phones. It's fun talking about Apple, even though it's not necessarily in my wheelhouse. Still had a great conversation. I want to thank everyone that came over from Best Phone Plans to show their support to Technoid and ask that you guys do subscribe. He does make quality content. Like I said, he had an episode a while back with John Prosser on, which I thought was fantastic. I mean, that dude's a legend, and I freaking love watching his content. Plus, he's also had Sneed on the channel as well, and I know you guys love Sneed. And I want to thank the sponsor of the video, that energy drink company. I'm sorry, could you repeat the energy company?
Rogue Energy.
Rogue Energy. I want to thank the sponsor of the video, Rogue Energy. I look forward to trying your product thanks to Technoid's generosity. And make sure you guys, if you are interested in buying it, use his promo code Technoid to get 10% off.
Thank you so much, Dennis. That was very, very kind of you. I really appreciate hearing those kind words from you. And again, guys, Dennis, I encourage you all to check out the Best Phone Plans. Him and Stetson have a great podcast. I've been getting into it more now, so you will be seeing me pop up more frequently. It is a great show. I learn a lot about cellular. As a matter of fact, I'm not ashamed to say this. I am a casual when it comes to cellular. And I learned a lot from Sneed. I learned a lot from Carlos. And I definitely learned a lot from you and Stetson. So it is a very enjoyable podcast. And I encourage everybody to check out his podcast. From my viewers, if you've never heard of it, if you want to learn about probably some of the best savings for a phone plan, the best value for your money, check out the Best Phone Plan podcast with Dennis and Stetson. It is some great content. Great for everybody. And with that said, we will sign it off. Thank you all for watching. See you all on the next one. And don't forget, hugs, not drugs. Peace.